Right. Our department's unique. We have one we're unique. In fact, we're so big. We have almost 25 people. We offer 40 courses. We have 3 different disciplines. And so in the humanities combined 15 years ago, they appointed one head. And 1 year was from English department, 1 year was social studies. And they wanted to come up with a model that was better and was a little bit more shared leadership because there's so much responsibility, so many people, and just the size itself. And philosophically, they thought that was a better model. So we came up with a structure. We have 4 different facilitators. And we serve as department heads, like we sit on department head meetings and are consulted with it by the administration. But it's a little bit different in the fact that we are elected democratically by our peers. Ultimately, the decision is still Ms. Kleekamp's decision, who's ever the principal. What happens is we have a ballot. The terms are 2 years. We have 4 different positions. Like I said, one is curriculum. One focuses on professional development and helps with the hiring and personnel. One is the administrative overall, seeing that the department runs smoothly. And the other one, the new one we have right now, is informational technology. Mm-hmm. But we all work collaboratively together. We meet often and make decisions together. So it's not one person making a decision. And it has worked really well for us. And to answer your question, I do feel like we have say. I do feel like we are listened to, even though department head sometimes can be seen cynically as just an information sharing body. Our input is asked and changes are made as a result. So again, it's better to be in the loop and in the conversation than not to be a part of it all, is what I would argue.
I mean, do you see perhaps the other departments moving in that direction from just your interaction with them, or?
Mr. Gill actually would like to move that direction with the math department and see more of a shared leadership model. So he's asked a lot of questions just to me informally, since we're friends, and he's shown an interest in it. The other departments, I've never spoken with them about it, so I'm not sure if they'd be interested. Science is another one that's a little bit bigger as well.
Yes,
so it might work for them. So
yeah, it's very interesting, I think, to see our teachers addressing that problem and perhaps making changes themselves. I mean, especially since, though you say students, generally speaking, prefer to have a say in things, the vast majority of club leaderships, I think forensics is perhaps the only exception, appoints their leaders, basically. There's often an application process, but barring that is true, isn't it?
Yeah, I think for the most part, most clubs, it's not so clear how the leaders are chosen, at least to the club members. And, well, like I said earlier, that's another thing Vivian and I are working on. We want club leadership selection to be, if not more democratic, at least more transparent, so members do have an idea how their leaders are being chosen. And, I know definitely I've heard complaints about the way club leaders are chosen now. And, there's definitely a lot of ways that we can reform it and improve it.
I just heard, I don't know who I heard it from, but it was just this week, I think, that one of the teachers was talking about there's a new proposal, a new idea out there, model that for club leadership that people would have to come up with an action plan, underclassmen, and present, here's what we would do. Here's a part of what we're hoping to achieve at this club. And so that would be more of an application process.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a much better idea than what some clubs have right now, which is sort of like, oh, we're friends, you can be the next leader for the next school year. And definitely that would help with getting clubs more involved with what their actual missions are. Like, I know some service clubs actually are starting to lose focus on the cause itself and really focus more on having bake sales and raising just money. Whereas any club can hold a bake sale, but UNICEF does things that only UNICEF can do. Habitat for Humanity does things that only Habitat can do. Not saying that those clubs in particular, but some clubs are losing focus on the actual goal of the club itself and just are in it to earn money or raise money.
I think it was through Mr. Kirsten. He was talking with Ms. Ung in the library, and that was her idea. I think now that I think of it, was just earlier this week, and she suggested that they, especially for the service ones, that they come up with a plan and say specifically, here's what our mission is, here's what we want to do in the next year. So I thought that was a great idea.
Yeah.
So Barton, would you, as the Senator of Student Life, push for democratic appointment of selection of club leaders, or would you feel that that's not, a good method of selecting club leaders in this context?
Maybe not specifically democratically electing, or at least not, randomly just, oh, we're going to vote now. But it's I think the idea that Mr. Seehafer brought up is actually really good. And in terms of having clubs that actually do things and having leadership that knows what to expect, what their own expectations are for the club in the coming year, and to have goals set out just because we want, at least I myself want every club at HCAS to be, have a purpose, right? We talked about it during club leader meetings. What is your club's purpose and how do you achieve that? We want, each member of, any club to be able to just go up to them and ask, okay, so what does your club do? And we want them to be able to say, okay, I'm in the music club, and what we do is promote, new and upcoming bands in Hong Kong or something, just to clearly understand the purpose of them joining the club and what they're doing in the club, instead of just saying, oh yeah, I'm in Habitat because I want it on my resume.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But I mean, coming back to the whole idea of people generally want to say, and thus leaders that perhaps are elected have more standing authority.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're basically saying you wouldn't push for democracy though in club leadership.
I wouldn't always push for democracy. Just with the idea that, once again referencing the idea that Mr. Seehafer brought up, I guess one thing we could do is have, people that want to be club leaders for the next year present these ideas to the club as a whole during a club meeting, and then have them take votes on it.
But I feel like size does make a big difference. I mean, you have different clubs that are lacking in members, so to speak, and there's also the difficulty of scheduling, where many clubs, many people actually have to prioritize their clubs because of the scheduling issues. So I feel like even though it may seem like a club doesn't have a purpose, not that I'm saying clubs I'm personally involved in is like that, but I like that. But I'm saying the achievement of purpose can be affected by a multitude of factors.
But I do want to come back to this issue of, do you think democracy is a viable method of selecting club leaders?
Do you just want a yes or no?
I want a yes or no, and perhaps tell me why you think so. Because I feel like you're leaning in the no direction, but you won't.
Well, I'm just saying that, in some clubs, it might not be the best option, at least the way they currently have it. But yes, ultimately, elected leaders do have more support from their constituents, at least in my opinion. And so if there was a good way to have club members make educated votes for their leaders, not just, Billy is my friend, so I'll vote for him for sure. Sort of like this person has a vision for our club. They know what they're doing, and they know what they want out of the club for the next year. I'm going to vote for them. That's sort of what I would be aiming for, having, educated, democratically elected club leaders.
Which is always the ideal.
Yeah.
But, I mean, in the current state, you think no?
In the current state, I think some clubs need to look at how they're doing, and at the moment, some clubs might not be suited for.
So club to club basis, basically.
Yeah, basically. Right now, depending on the club, some clubs are really clear with their purpose and goals, and their leaders, the people who want to be leaders for the next year, are really into, they really understand what the point of the club is, and I think those clubs can have, I think
perhaps think about moving into.
Yeah, or if they had a democratic election, I think that would be that wouldn't be a problem. Whereas some other clubs, it's very, the purpose of the club changes on a yearly basis. The direction's not always clear, and that might not be the best idea to start having democratic elections before you can establish a clear sort of purpose for your club.
Fair enough.
I agree.
I think it was Thomas Jefferson that said you always get the rulers you deserve. So particularly in democracy, you were talking about people not always making the wisest decisions. If they don't make wise decisions, you may see that in U.S. government right now. That's you got to live with those at least until the term's out, or unless you recall those officials.
It's better that way than you have. I don't know. I'd say in the Hong Kong government right now with the elections, a lot of the people are very unhappy with the candidates that we have
as well.
But you can't really have a say because it's a pseudo-democratic government, So I feel like it's you better live with the decisions that you make and have to live with those responsibilities as a voter, as opposed to
So none of you would be in favor of a benevolent, appointed leadership.
Well, if the appointed leader was perfectly benevolent, I wouldn't have a problem with that. But the problem is, you can't have an ideal benevolent dictatorship, or at least not easily.
Just in the way you can't have an ideal benevolent democracy?
Well, but with an elected sort of ruling body, there's more accountability involved. If you did appoint a benevolent dictator, the dictator is not, technically held accountable to anyone else, right? The people can riot, and as we saw in the Arab Spring, they can overthrow the ruling government. But if you just appoint someone, there's less of a feeling of, I guess, responsibility and obligation to the people that they're serving.
That being said, I mean, there are plenty of examples historically of dictatorships or monarchies where there is absolute power and the citizens are happy. I mean, especially if they're, an oil-rich fiefdom or, and there's a balance between that and people having some sense of rights.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be full democratic rights or full freedom of speech, but look at China. I mean, yes, they do repress, or suppress the, the opposition, but at the same time, people, if they're doing well economically and they have a sense that they have say in their life and, they can purchase their own clothes and, have leisure time with their friends and family, for the most part, democracy would be secondary to those economic needs. So.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at voter turnout in many countries, I mean, it's not very high, is it? So, I mean, what does that mean? Is that an indication that people don't care about this, or is it they don't feel like they need a vote? It's very...
I think...
At least there's a choice.
Yeah, at least from AP Gov last year, one of the, I guess, theories behind this is that most people feel like their single vote won't make a big enough difference, so they don't go. And actually, statistically speaking, though, if, say, I as an individual were to not choose to go to the ballot boxes on voting day, my decision to not vote actually would not impact the outcome. At least, on like a statistics level. But then if, with the, I guess, like you said, low voter turnout, if the turnout is low enough, then there's the issue, right? Not enough people are actively, making the choice, or they're not actively participating in the political process.
But by not voting, that abstention is actually a vote in itself.
True.
It's saying we either are happy with the status quo, or we completely give up and there's absolutely no hope in that. My vote really doesn't matter.
Sort of like when opposition parties walk out of...
Yeah, I think the problem with not voting is, I mean, you don't know which one it is. Is it simply because there's no one you want to vote for, or it's that you don't care enough to vote? I mean, there's no way of telling which reason it is.
Or you could be like Australia and force people to vote.
Precisely. I mean, I was about to bring that up, because we said earlier this afternoon that the political system in the U.S. is not very ideal, despite the fact that it's continued for so long. I mean, there are many other models across the democratic world that we could perhaps also look at, Australia being one of them. I mean, aside from the fact that there's compulsory voting, which, does anyone approve of compulsory voting?
Well, we kind of do compulsory voting.
Yes, we do compulsory voting.
Exactly. You make people do it in homeroom, we make sure that they, turn on the computers and vote, so...
And
although, are you allowed to? So there are no abstentions in the Australian vote. Like you can't just check like.
No, you can submit a blank ballot. There's no law against.
But
that.
you still have to physically.
You have to physically go to show up and vote.
Or you'd be fine.
Well, I think that honestly, I think that makes sense.
Reasonable, yeah.
I mean, because
I mean, if you really felt strongly about not voting for anyone, then you just submit the blank ballot. At this rate, I think some people are literally like either living too far away from a voting station, or they're too lazy to go out to the to the polls, and that's maybe a very small amount of people, but still like that could be part of the reason there's such a low voter turnout in so many countries, especially with
part of it is inconvenience and whatnot. There's restrictions.
Yeah,
there's a lot of voter ID laws right now being contested in the United States, and some people, particularly poor people, aren't going to have photo IDs. They don't own a driver's license or whatnot. Passports. And so that's, in some ways, you can see it's very discriminatory. But the other side is when you have voter fraud, people registering multiple times. So I mean, both of them are evils. They're both bad parts of the system. Another idea, I mean, is going to some kind of an online voting. If you ever were able to create a system that was secure enough. I mean, it's easy when we do it here through a Google Doc or whatever.
Yes.
I mean,
because no one's going to interfere with our voting.
The stakes aren't as high as the United States. Right. But if you could create a system like that where you could do, everyone could vote from home or use your social security number, or have free access at any library or public school or whatever, I think you get more than 50% participation in America. So it's not just apathy. I think there are other issues.
Yeah.
I mean, being the only person in this room who has voted, and do you feel compulsory voting would work in the U.S., or would that be a cultural shock? Or
it would be such a cultural shock because people are so strong in their beliefs in individuality and not being suppressed by the government. I mean, people are so good. One of the reasons people are against the Obamacare is not because it wouldn't benefit them economically. It's because the government is mandating that they have to have some kind of health care.